In this video I'm going to show you how to make these little baskets. So there's 3 different sizes, and they are all made using the same pattern. We're using multiple strands of yarn. So the little bowl uses just 1 strand of yarn, the middle-sized dish uses 2 strands of yarn, and then the larger dish uses 3 strands of yarn. So I'm using a worsted weight or Aran weight yarn. For this small bowl I'm using a 4.5 or a 4mm hook, so you just got to go with what gives you a nice dense fabric. Then for the bowl that uses 2 strands of yarn, I'm using a 6mm hook, and then for the basket where I'm using 3 strands of yarn, I'm using a 7mm hook. But as I said, yarn thicknesses vary even within specified weight bands, so you might just have to experiment, because what you're aiming for is a nice sturdy fabric. Obviously with the single strand, it's a little bit floppier. I just use it to keep small things in, like my rings, and I just found one of my son's teeth in there. And then the medium-sized bowl is really handy. I've got a few of these in the bathroom. It's good for keeping cotton buds and hair bands in. They're also really great if you're making a little gift collection for someone of, you know, some small items like some toiletries or something. So these work up really quick. They're great if you need to make loads of them. Maybe you could even put treats in there, sweets, chocolates, something like that. Very versatile and really easy. So watch my video next, and I hope you enjoy it and have a go at making them. So I'm going to make the larger bowl, and I'm using 3 strands of Aran, or you could use 3 strands of worsted. You could use 3 different colours, 3 colours the same, or 2 different colours, so you'd have 1 colour and then 2 colours of 2 strands of the second colour. So you might need to wind off a good section. It's probably actually better if you've got 3 separate balls, to be honest. So I've got a 7mm hook for this one. I'm going to start with a magic ring, or if you don't get on with magic rings, you can just do a chain 4 and join to form a ring. So there are quite a lot of different variations for the magic ring. This is just how I'm doing it, because this is quite sticky wool because it's a natural yarn. The fibres stick together, so I just do quite a basic magic ring. I just do a one wrap magic ring. So I start with the tail end of the yarn lying down across my fingers, and then I'm going to wrap the yarn round the back and allow it to cross over at the front, at which point I'm going to pinch the yarn and leaving a long enough tail that I can catch in as I work round, and that's what helps stop it coming undone. So keeping those the crossover point pinched, I'm going to put my hook through this loop from front to back. I'm going to grab the yarn and I'm going to pull up a loop. I'm going to chain 3, and then following the pattern I'm going to make 11 double crochets into this ring, and while I'm working around the ring into the ring I'm going to make sure I'm catching in these tail ends as well. So just a quick reminder of a double crochet. I'm going to yarn over, go into the ring, pull up a loop. You've got 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, draw off 2, yarn over, draw off 2. Ooh, making sure you don't lose any of your strands. So obviously it's a little bit trickier with multiple strands. but you just got to take a bit more care and you'll soon get used to it. So I'm going to go ahead now and make another 10 double crochets. So if you find that you're running out of tail ends, just pull the ring a little bit tighter so that you're still crocheting over this. This is what helps to sort of keep it in place. So I need 12 in total, including the chain 3 at the beginning. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12. So if you're a beginner, as I said, it's probably easier to start off with just one strand, because it's a little bit tricky getting used to using multiple strands. It's not difficult, you just got to be a bit more careful. So now I'm going to actually close up this ring by pulling the tail end. And you can sew that in later. So that magic ring is, because this is just a little bowl, it's not anything that's going to be pulled or you know, like a toy or something. That magic ring should be more than enough, more than secure enough to stay put. You can always tie sew in that end as well when you're finished, just to make sure. So I'm going to slip stitch into my chain 3, the third chain of my beginning chain 3, which has sort of shrunk a little bit, is down here. So as a guide I always tend to use the first proper stitch as my guide. So that's my first proper double crochet, and that's the top of the stitch, so my chain 3 must be there. And because it has actually shrunk quite a bit, I'm going to make the decision here to put another double crochet in and completely skip that chain 3, because it's going to if I slip stitch into there, it's going to create a bit of a dip. So the best thing is just to ignore that chain and slip stitch into the first stitch. If your chain 3 is the right height, then you can just go ahead and slip stitch into that. So you can see after round 1 you should have a nice chunky little disc with 12 double crochets. Now we're going to do round 2. I'm going to start off with the chain 3, which again will count as a double crochet. We're going to put another double crochet in the same spot where you've made the slip stitch join from the previous end of the previous round. And now we're going to go around and we're going to put 2 double crochets into each stitch, to each of the remaining 11 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back at the end of the round. So we're not going to join the end of this round, so at the end of round 2 you should have 24 double crochets, counting this chain 3 as one stitch. You should have a nice chunky flat disc of work. So the next thing is to get a stitch marker and place it into the last stitch, because we're going to switch from rounds to working in a spiral now. So the next round is single crochets. So we're going to single crochet into the third chain of the beginning chain 3 of the previous round. So single crochet, go into the stitch. This chain is a bit tight. Pull up a loop, yarn over, draw off all 2 stitches. First single crochet made. Then we're going to make another single crochet, 1 single crochet into the next stitch. Then we're going to make an increase So we're going to put 2 single crochets into the 3rd stitch. And so we're going to carry on around like that. 2 lots of 1 single crochet, so 1 single crochet in the next stitch, 1 single crochet in the 2nd stitch, 2 single crochets or an increase in the 3rd stitch. So carry around like that, and I'll meet you as we come towards the stitch marker. So I'm just coming up to the last stitch, which, if you remember, we've put our stitch marker in, and in this stitch I'm going to do another increase. So let's put a stitch marker in the last stitch we've just made, so that we're marking the end of that row. So you should start to see that your bowl is starting to curl up. It might be curling up on the wrong side, that doesn't matter. You can just invert it to the right side. So don't worry about that too much, we can always turn it around to the right side later on. And at the end of that round you should have 32 stitches. Now we're ready for row 4, and this is another increase round with single crochets. We're just going to start off putting 1 single crochet into the 1st stitch, then we're making an increase, so putting 2 single crochets into the stitch, and then we're going to put 1 single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. Making sure you're catching all the yarns, and then an increase in the next stitch, so 2 in 1, and then 1 into each of the next 3 stitches. So carry on like that, and I'll meet you as I get near the end of the round. So after the last increase I should be left with 2 stitches. One of them has got the stitch marker in, so just going to remove that, put 1 stitch to each of the last 2 stitches, and then pop that stitch marker back into the last stitch. So the next rounds 5 to 9, we're just going to put 1 single crochet into each stitch. So you should have 40 stitches at the end of round 4. So on the if you go to my website and print out the free pattern, I have actually put on there just a handy little tally here, where after each row that you've crocheted, you can just cross off the little circle just to help you keep on track. So I'm going to crochet another 5 rounds just straight with just 1 single crochet into each stitch. Remember to replace the stitch marker after you've made the last stitch of each round, just so that you can keep on track. So I'm going to go ahead and do these next 5 rounds straight, and I'll meet you back here when I've done that. So I'm just coming to the end of row 9, and I'm just going to mark that off on my sheet. So at this point, don't worry if it doesn't look like your bowl is curving in enough, because row 10 sorts that out. So row 10, we're just going to slip stitch into the back loop of each stitch. So you've got the front loop and the back loop. We're just going to go into the back loop and we're going to slip stitch. So slip stitch, you're just going into the stitch, you're grabbing the yarn and you're pulling it all the way through the live loop on your hook. So I have got a bit of a knot here in my yarn. Not sure how that's gonna, if it goes on the inside I'm gonna leave it. Not sure if I'm very happy with that knot. I'm going to actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, it's really annoying when that happens. I'm going to go back to the first stitch of the last round. I'm actually going to go back to the last stitch of the last round. I'm going to unpick the last stitch and I'm going to cut that yarn and I'm going to join it as I showed you before, because that then doesn't make a knot. So I'm just going to drop the yarn I don't want, add the new yarn, start the last stitch with the old bit of yarn, first step of the stitch, into the stitch, pull up a loop, drop the old bit, add the new bit, finish off the stitch. So I'm actually going to put a stitch marker in the last stitch of that round, just because on this last row when I'm slip stitching, it just means I don't lose track of where I am, because sometimes you can get a bit carried away and end up going round and round in a circle, never ending. So now I'm going to go back to my slip stitching into the back loop only. So as I said, don't worry if your bowl doesn't look like it's curving up particularly well at the moment. This last row, because a slip stitch is a very tight stitch, it has a different gauge to the single crochet you've been doing. This will pull the rim of your bowl, your little dish, inwards to give it that nice shape. So I'm just going to go ahead and slip stitch all the way around, and I'll meet you back at the end of this final round. So now come to the last stitch. So I'm going to put in a final slip stitch, and you can fasten off in your preferred method, but I'm actually going to use a sewing wool needle. So I'm going to, you can do a slip stitch if you like, but I don't like the knot that leaves, so I'm going to pull out this live loop until the ends pop out, and I'm going to thread each one of these individually. I'm not sure if I'll get all 3 threads in this needle. I might do. Might get lucky. Oh, there we go. Did one at a time. I think if you try and do all 3 together, it'll probably be a bit of a nightmare. So I'm going to make a mock stitch to finish with, which means I'm going to skip the next stitch and go into the second stitch, same way I would go with my knitting, with my crochet hook, front to back. Make sure I'm pulling the right ends, and then the point where this bit of yarn is coming out of the stitch, if you look here, there's the last stitch I made. My needle is going to go straight back down that exact same spot. I'm going to catch in the back ridge of the crochet. I'm going to pull that through until that stitch matches the rest of my slip stitches, and then I'm just going to weave these ends along a couple of stitches. That's a bit tough there, but not too bad. I'm actually going to cut that off now. You can go back the other way if you want to. I'm just going to sew these ends in as well. I'm going to use the same method. Thread 1, thread 2, move them along to make a bit of space, thread 3, and I'm actually going to turn it inside out just for this little bit to make it easier for myself. I'm just going to go through some of these stitches, the first set of stitches I did, and then I could have been a bit more careful then probably and not unthreaded the needle. Then I'm going to catch a couple of stitches and go back the other way just to secure it, but it should be okay. As I said, wool is very sticky and it tends to stick to itself. Let's get those very congested here now. I don't really want to go anywhere, so my magic ring should be safe. Let's trim that. Let's trim these ends we've just sewn in. And then we've got these little bits here where the yarn, I ended the yarn and then there was a knot. I'm just going to take, and remember I've turned my bowl inside out, I'm going to take one end along a couple of stitches and one end the other way, just so that we don't get too much of a lump. Trim that. Same with these. One way and one the other. There we are. Trim them off. Turn it back round the right way. Give it a little shape. And there you have it. Your little bowl. Well, the biggest of the 3 bowls.